Are they a false prophet? Now, a false prophet isn't always like a cult leader who's deliberately malicious. Sometimes a false prophet is just somebody who's accidentally wrong. They think they're right, they're wrong. The most important thing to do is just to ask God, God, correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong so that I can correct myself publicly. I don't want to mislead people. I want to tell people the truth. I don't want to tell people what I think. I want to tell people what you want them to know. Things like that. But a lot of people don't actually do that. They share their opinion and they don't ever make prayers like that, and they're wrong. And so, because they're wrong and they're spreading something that isn't true, like the Council of Nicaea did, they spread this idea that Jesus is God. They didn't pray about it, apparently, or God would have told them. They would have felt inspired and they would have publicly announced, hey, we take it back, actually. We think he's not God, that it's a nuanced thing, and that these passages are figures of speech. They would have said that, but they didn't, so they were false prophets. If they would have made the prayer and then publicly corrected themselves, they would have been prophets. I mean, it's just like in different moments. If I'm sure there were moments in their life where they said things that were true and correct and accurate, and in those moments they were true prophets. But when it came to telling everybody that Jesus was God, they were acting as false prophets. They were false. What they were saying was false. They were wrong, incorrect, inaccurate. So that's important to keep in mind. The origin of the idea that Jesus is God came from a council assembled by a politician whose motivation wasn't necessarily to unify the church or to solve any problems. His motivation was to make it easier to get reelected. And I think this is part of why God allowed them to fail as like prophets. Because if this politician who has insincere motivations, he only wants to uh, what he wanted to do was to make it easier to get reelected. When he runs for office again and he wants to appeal to Christians again, the problem he wanted to solve for himself was that as a Christian, different Christians have different beliefs, and he wanted to get every Christian to believe the same thing so that he could appeal to all of them rather than give his own genuine beliefs and then appeal to whoever agreed with him and unfortunately not appeal to anybody who disagreed with him. And so instead of being sincere and letting whoever agreed with him and disagree with him, he wanted to manipulate the collective beliefs and make them uniform. He wanted to eliminate varying opinions. He wanted all opinions to be uniform so that it was very easy to appeal to everybody and get more votes. He was just trying to get more votes. And so, because God knew that was his intention, and he formed this council, God planned way ahead of time these people that got elected into this council. They just happened to be the scholars at the time, the scholars that this guy picked. And these scholars, God allowed them to push this incorrect idea. Why? Why did God make that choice? Why did God not allow him to assemble a council would, which God would then inspire to preach the correct message, which is that God is one and Jesus is not God? Why did God not plan that outcome? Because he's not going to reward because that would glorify that politician. That would end up glorifying that politician because he's the one who assembled them. So that's why God chose to plan things in this way so that this council would fail and end up being false prophets. That way, it does not glorify this insincere politician. That's why God planned it that way. Now, if there was some kind of very sincere person who did assemble a council, and his motivation was to really solve some like scriptural mysteries. Then I think because that man had sincere intentions, that God would bless the whole operation, the whole council, and he would inspire them and uh, cause them to succeed, and it would glorify that guy because his intention would be to glorify God. The politician's intention was not to glorify God, so God wasn't going to glorify him. But if somebody were trying to glorify God and they really just wanted to give the whole church a deeper, truer understanding of God's word, then those intentions would have been noticed by God, and God would have rewarded them and glorified him for glorifying it. Because God is the most appreciative person, the most grateful. Anything you try to do for God, God is grateful. It's odd to say because he's God and we're just humans, but if you do something nice for somebody, maybe if you even do something nice for like the CEO of a company, you know that they're CEO and they know that you're just a janitor. But if you just do something like, oh, it's their birthday and you give them a cupcake, the CEO is so grateful and they say, thank you. Nobody else got me a cupcake. So for you, I'm giving you $1,000 or I'm going to give you a raise, something like very appreciative. No matter what, like our status is compared to God, God is grateful to the things we do for him. And this is something I learned from not necessarily the Quran, but from Muslims and from Islam, because I learned the 99 names of Allah, and one of them is that he's the most grateful, the most appreciative. And I thought that was cool to see because it's like, I mean, first of all, it's cool to know, of course, he is the most appreciative out of all the human souls in existence, however appreciative and grateful any of them are. God is even more grateful. He's perfectly grateful. He's never ungrateful, never unappreciative. Every atom's weight of, and that's also something I copied from kind of Islam, is the phrase an atom's weight. Every atom's weight of something to be grateful for, appreciative for. He shows appreciation for it. So, and also the opposite is true where, if somebody has insincere intentions, then what is the opposite of appreciation? Whatever that is, that politician, that insincere politician received that. So he didn't receive glory for it. This is why God would allow a council of Christian scholars to fail, is because he wasn't about to glorify this guy. So that's the origin of the idea that Jesus was God. It was all born from a council that was formed by an insincere politician. God didn't want to glorify him. That's why God planned that outcome that way. Instead, God used Muhammad, the illiterate prophet, which I used the word illiterate as a compliment, to let the world know that Jesus is not God, plain and simple. God relayed the message through, and so because Muhammad was very obedient to God, he made every effort to glorify God, and so God glorified him and gave him the message that Jesus is not God.